General position of Japanese women in your society right now in terms of legal access, what are their rights and everything?
Okay. Well, in Japan, men and women are equal under the law thanks to the equality clause in the Japanese constitution and political and social reforms after World War II. Inheritance from parents is also legally equal. One of the achievements of the feminist movement in Japan was the passage of the Equal Employment Opportunity Law in 1985. This promoted equality between men and women in recruiting, hiring, and many other things at workplaces. However, even after that, in the reality of Japan, men and women are not equal. As in the case in many countries, maintaining the home is considered to be a woman's job. Men spend extremely little time engaged in household work and childcare, and compared to other countries. Women have lower income and often work part-time in the labor market. Men are primarily responsible for the household budget, but many women have to work outside the home to support the family. As a result, women are exhausted from double work, and Japanese men, especially middle-aged and older men living in rural areas, still have a strong tendency to think of themselves as patriarchs with powers over their wives and children. Due to economic imbalance between men and women are undervalued as the labor force. This has led to inequality even in public education, which should be equal. In many medical schools' entrance examinations, scores have long been manipulated so that male students can pass easier compared to female students. But this became a big problem when it came to light. Those universities wanted to reduce the number of women who passes the entrance exam because they believed that women could not endure the hard work of doctors as well as men. However, there are many women in Japan who would like to be seen by excellent female doctors. On websites that search for doctors, they usually have a search item, whether female doctors working here or not. It was also revealed that in entrance exam in some public high schools in Tokyo, in some cases, the minimum passing score for boys is 243 points lower than for girls, out of total 1,000 points. The reason given was that too many girls make the boys shrink up, but this cannot be justified.
I was wondering, how we perceive a woman based on what we see in popular culture, how we see them in TV, how we see them in films and everything, right? So they say that art imitates life and life imitates art. So could you talk a little bit about the portrayal of Japanese women in popular culture?
In society where women are placed below men, many men tend not to respect women. This is especially evident in pornographic videos and pornographic manga and anime, where women are regarded as weak-minded sexual toys with no dignity. A significant amount of the porn videos and pornographic anime circulating in the world originate from Japan. The Japanese pornography industry treats high school girls in school uniforms as sexual icons, which is spread abroad through videos. Satisfying the sexual desire of men takes precedence over protecting young children and girls. It is a terrible thing, especially evident on the internet.
Yeah, I would like you to go in a little bit more deeper in terms of the pornification of Japanese women. Now, the influence of manga and anime, it's an international form of, it has become an international form of entertainment, but that directly creates a perception about how a Japanese woman is. Like, people watch anime and manga, and their perception about Japanese women, the real women, also is radically changed based on that. Could you talk a little bit about the pornification, please?
Since many decades ago, when pornography was still limited to print media and pornographic videos, the image of women in such video and gravures have already been terrible. The characteristics that can be found there are excuses for men and sadism. The excuse is that there are women who are dominated by their own sexual desires and want to be seen as sexual toys, so there is nothing wrong with watching and enjoying them. And there is also the pharocentric sadism of wanting to sexually abuse, humiliate, and dominate women who are taboo to be sexualized. Men have taught women to tolerate this kind of pornography because it is the fantasy for men. However, demanding that women should tolerate misogynistic male fantasies is based on the power gap between men and women, and the overflow of pornography has damaged the dignity of women in Japan. The full affirmation by men of their own sexual desire is justification for the exploitation of women. And of course, Japanese feminists have always been angry about this. Pornography has strong influence on reality. Many men try to test what they had learned from pornography on their girlfriends, wives, or women who work in the sex industry, and they often end up hurting women's heart and bodies. They have the wrong notion that the harder they stimulate, women will be pleased more. There are also men who mistakenly assume that weak personality of women depicted in pornography are the characteristics of real women. In the 1980s, there was a Lolita complex boom, more precisely a pedophile boom in the subculture world, where young girls shown in anime-like illustrations were treated as objects of male sexual desire. At the time, both the men who liked it and public knew that it was an underground culture. And then this subculture took root in the world along with the development of a culture of amateur circles that getting together to share parodies and illustrations. Later, a large number of computer games using pornographic anime pictures were also created. As the use of internet became more widespread in the general public, both live-action pornography and pornographic anime and manga became available in large numbers. In early 2000s, the term Cool Japan came into the limelight, and people began to think that Japanese pop culture, including manga and anime, could help Japan's economic growth strategies as it is loved in foreign countries. What I mean here is anime and manga like Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, Naruto, Pocket Monsters, and others. Of course, this did not mean that Japan has a policy to promote pornographic manga and anime. However, as manga and anime had already become mainstream culture, I mean the industry with a large popularity and a lot of money, This trend has also given self-esteem and power to those who love pornographic manga and anime. Now there are many advertisements for pornographic games and manga on the internet, and since it is possible to view a large amount of pornography for free, people, including junior high students or some cases younger children, have become immersed in a highly stimulating pornography. In pornographic anime, the patterned image of the ideal woman is someone who does not reject any man sexually and who will certainly give sexual satisfaction. The heroines are depicted as an erotic toy who enjoy to be seen and touched, or one who accepts everything out of kind of love. These ideal girls look up to men and respect them and recognize their powers and personalities. So those girls are often sexually innocent, ignorant, and immature. These girls are often portrayed with childlike large eyes and speak and behave childishly, but in many cases, they also have breasts that are too large. Women in pornographic anime are given top priority as soft bodies for men to touch and feel good about, and any element that might hurt a man's feelings is totally eliminated. In case of pornographic anime, men who like it excuses that it is about fictional beings. They say that fictional beings do not get hurt. So they are not aware that they are hurting the dignity of women as whole. To be more precise, men know that they are hurting women, but they prioritize satisfying their own desire. Men also consider the Lolita complex as a matter of human freedom or freedom of expression, which they say should be protected and respected. Thus, as long as they spend their time in a community of porn lovers, it is difficult for men to realize that it is an issue that harms human dignity and human rights. Japanese society is suffering from a sense of anxiety, stagnation, and fatigue caused by the long years of recession. As a means of escaping from this reality, many men have come to rely on pornographic culture, which views the female body as a reward. In other words, men want to relieve stress, to stop thinking, to be forgiven, to be healed. In my opinion, the need to escape from those pain has now become just an excuse for self-pity, and men are simply addicted to pornography and have developed a constant need for sexual stimulation. The image of women depicted in pornographic videos and anime from Japan appeared abroad. Misconceptions about Japanese women are spreading abroad, and it is said that even real Japanese women are considered to be nothing more than pornographic toys. I cannot help fearing that pornography is an evil that spreads prejudice against Japanese women.
Yes, and I think the perception about Japanese women after watching anime sort of extends to just a perception of any woman that a man sees, and therefore his behavior, his communication to the female sex is directly related to his image that he has consumed from pornography, and therefore he considers female sex to be somehow degrading or subservient, or somehow is out there for the service of a man's sexual desire. And I think this is true for India as well, because many young Indian school kids, college kids, etc., are so well versed with the kind of content that comes out as manga and anime, to an extent that there are, social media fan groups of certain manga cartoons or anime cartoons where they go in depth and discuss about the story and what they could have done and things like that. But I am very, very afraid to imagine how that can actually easily direct to the sexual aspect of it, where they're discussing what they could do to the girl or what they could have done or how they could have hurt more and things like that. It is extremely scary to think that. And in India, given that there are so many rapes already, these things are only feeding into the perception of what a woman is to Indian men. For example, in India, there is the caste system, and there is sexual violence that is very, very rampant. In international media, we are always making front page news when it comes to male violence against women. So similarly, for, in terms of sexual violence or any form of violence, what is the most noticeable and what is the most prevalent form of violence in Japan? Could you talk about that?
There are many molesters, Chikan, in crowded trains during commuting to work or school. According to medical experts who are familiar with this problem, most of the molesters are ordinary white-collar workers with college degree and wives and children. They consider touching a woman's body as a kind of reward for their work or stress relief from their work. Their perception is grossly distorted. Molesters talk about their molestations experiences on the internet, exchange information on route, timing, and carriage numbers that they are easy to molest, and sometimes gather together to molest the target together. In general, men tend to think that molestation is not a big deal for women, but for women, it is a tremendous deal. Our world will no longer be a place where we can trust or feel safe. We now need to be protective. Some women will be afraid of men in general, and in some cases, they will have a lifelong distrust of people and men. Some women have become unable to ride crowded trains. Some urban railroad companies have introduced a women-only carriages system throughout the day or in the morning and evening hours. The reason for the introduction of women-only carriages was a 1988 criminal case in which a man raped a man who had warned him against molestation on the train. Women all over the country were outraged. Since then, women have accused molesters of being a major social problem and have persistently appealed to society to eradicate them. And many railroad companies responded to these voices with women-only carriages.
This is only possible when we are able to clearly tell who a woman is, right? When it comes to the female class, there is a lot of ambiguity with regards to who a woman is, because anybody can identify as a woman these days. But when it comes to the female's sex-based rights, what are all the strides that have been made, in terms of exclusively female sex-based rights, like reproductive integrity, or positions of power and politics and things like that? Could you talk about what are the existing provisions for women in terms of their sex-based rights?
Emergency contraceptive pills have not been approved for over-the-counter use. They are finally starting to be considered, but it's not clear if they will surely be realized. However, Viagra was quickly approved and will soon be covered by public insurance. The cost of pregnancy and childbirth are only partially covered by the public insurance. And sex education in schools was deemed shameful, disgrace, and sex should be hidden by conservative people in the mid-1990s, and it is still dragging on with no real substantial things being taught in schools. I believe that desirable sex education should be along with human rights education and should be about respect for oneself and others, but neither is taught adequately in Japanese schools. Conservative politicians say that sex education should be left to the family, but not all families are capable of taking on this responsibility. In addition, as we are in a society where many crimes related to porn or sex are rampant, I believe that public education needs to be take responsibility for providing children with adequate and accurate information about sex. The age of sexual consent is as young as 13 years old, but sex education is not sufficiently provided. Women have voiced that the age of sexual consent should be 18 or at least 16, but efforts to change this have recently been crushed by legislators. Moreover, after this age, if a child becomes a victim of rape, she or he will be treated and judged by the same legal standard for rapes as an adult. It is terrible that young girls are not protected in a country like Japan, where there are many adult men who try to sexually exploit female students.
In my state, there was a case where over the counter the emergency contraceptive pills were not being sold. I campaigned for this particular situation, where I called the drug control director and I told them that such and such a thing is happening, and they have absolutely no regard for, say, example, minor rapes, or in poorly economically poor families where they already have so many children but they could avoid it, so with the contraception and things like that. None of that was taken into account until such time, but I campaigned for it, and I got emergency contraceptive pill to be sold over the counter in my state. It is there on paper, it is a law, and even now the medical shop owners are refusing to sell it because they think that they are punishing you for being sexually promiscuous. Like you went and had sex, therefore you're trying to somehow save yourself, but we won't allow it, we have to punish you, therefore we won't sell the medicine for you. But at the same time, like you're saying, Viagra is available. We talked a lot about all the setbacks and all the things that are going wrong in both our countries. I'm wondering if in modern day Japan, if there have been any success stories.
The improvement of women's rights in Japan has been gradual. The passage of the aforementioned Equal Employment Opportunity Law, together with its subsequent amendments, including the prevention of sexual and power harassment, has greatly improved women's rights in society. The social movement to eradicate molestation has also spread awareness in society that women's human rights and safety should be protected. In recent years, the global Me Too movement has also given courage to Japanese women, and victims of sexual violence have begun to gather together to demonstrate and speak out. Society has been changing in the direction of not allowing sexual violence, as evidenced by the fact that acquittals in the first trial of sexual violence-related cases have resulted convictions in the second trial.
Obviously, anybody who's listening can understand that all these things that are going on are wrong. This is not fair for the female members of the society. Now, these poor policies and everything, have they generated some form of an anger among young people in the society, in Japanese society, where they decided that I've had enough, I want to do a revolution, I want to change it, I want to change things for me, I want to change things for the next generation? Have there been any revolution of sorts?
That is what is happening right now. And women workers in Japan are now having their rights taken away without their knowledge. I and my fellow women are very angry about this. In Japan, an ordinance of Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare requires workplaces to have separate toilets for men and women, except in cases of special difficulties such as underground labor. But by having women-only toilets, women are able to work without worrying about sexual harassment, peeping, and secret filming. Although this law is still not fully followed in reality, it is still part of women's legitimate rights as workers. And in case of violation, we can appeal to the Labor Standard Bureau. However, the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare is now trying to include a new clause that states, in principle, separate toilets for men and women are to be maintained, but workplaces with 10 or fewer workers are exempt. It is important to note that workers with 10 or fewer workers consists more than 75% of Japanese total workplaces. Even though this is such an important issue, the publication of the starting of public comment was silently done on internet, and there were no media to cover this issue. Japanese women who were suddenly aware of this issue delivered about 1,500 public comments in opposition within the last 2 days of public comment term. From the previous minutes of the committee, we can see that there is a movement to eliminate not only women-only toilet, but also women's changing rooms and women's resting rooms from the workplaces. The entire right of workers to have a safe and humane work environment is about to be destroyed. However, most of well-known feminist scholars or pro-work political parties have not taken up this issue so far, but this is an issue that should be more widely known in Japan, and if it were known, almost all women workers would raise their voices in anger. Other anti-women policies include conservative and fiscal austerity policies that cut off the role of social welfare in areas such as elderly people's nursing care and put the burden on the family, which means on women. There is also a fear that under the influence of transgenderism, laws might be made or revised to reduce women's rights. If this happens, the anger of women will be even greater.
I hope so. I hope that women can understand that most of the time I might feel angry in isolation, and maybe I'll think that only I'm angry about it. Maybe everybody else is okay with it. Therefore, we feel very lonely. But if more and more women come together and express that anger together, they know that they're not alone. And then there is a community of women that are feeling anger towards something. Therefore, then they have more power in questioning or challenging or cornering authorities and asking them what is their right to have separate sex segregated spaces. And it is funny that they think it is okay because we fought for years together to get that right. And then all of a sudden, with the influence and the advent of transgenderism, suddenly there seems to be no distinction whatsoever between what a male is and what a female is. And therefore, the first thing to be cut off are women's rights. It is really, really baffling like that. We will talk about transgenderism in just a bit, but before that, the health workers that were asked to be at the Olympics village were demanded to be there during the Olympics. Can you talk a little bit about what exactly went on during that time? How were the health workers affected?
In Japan, 1 out of every 20 working women is a nurse. Even before the new corona epidemic, there was a chronic shortage of nurses in Japan. Even though there are a large number of qualified people, they are not able to continue working because the working environment is harsh and in many cases, they are not treated well. When It coincides with their own child rearing or nursing care for their parents. They are mentally and physically unable to continue working and therefore often leave the profession. In addition, the wage system for nurses is constructed premising the night shift, and if they cannot do night shifts, they are paid less. Being compelled to work night shifts, nurses tend to get tired, become unable to concentrate, and unable to maintain their physical strength. Many nurses enter the profession with a sense of mission, but because they are treated so poorly, they often feel that they are expendable. In the midst of corona epidemic, the Japanese government has not put much effort into improving the treatment of medical workers. As a result, nurses who had been scarce before are now even more scarce, and burden on each and every one of them has become greater. The number of nurses leaving work due to hard work or overwork and depression increased. Not long ago, the Japanese government said that they would send 500 nurses to the Olympic venues, but 2 weeks before the opening of the Games, it was decided that 80% of the venues would have no spectators. So I saw the voices of relief from the medical workers on Twitter.
Now I think we come to the interesting part of our discussion, where I want to discuss more about the advent of the gender identity ideology. I want to just give you an overview of what's happening over here. Over here, even though self ID hasn't been written into law, there are a lot of people that are moving high courts demanding that the men who identify as female have F written on their passports with absolutely no change in their body, which means they will continue to have their male anatomy, and yet in their government documentation it will contain female under the sex category. And there is also a lot of problems in India with regards to the usage of the word sex and gender. We do not have separate distinct words to mean sex and gender. Therefore it creates a lot of problems, because people often use it interchangeably. Like if I say my gender is female, and if I now identify as male, that automatically becomes that my sex is also male. Therefore they start using that in all the government documents and everything. So it is a very, very precarious situation for women's rights in India with regards to transgenderism. What's going on in Japan? Can you talk about that?
The women's liberation movement in Japan worked to overcome the culture of inequality, and these women gained certain rights. At least until the early 1990s, it was an activity to overcome the disadvantage of being a woman, to seek equality between men and women, to win legal equality in employment, to appeal for the right not to have one's body violated, and to regain the power to live by affirming themselves. But now, in the world of Japanese academia, feminism has been swallowed up by postmodernism and queer studies. Unfortunately, it is no longer a discipline that protects women's rights. In the mid-1990s, there was the aforementioned conservative bashing of sex education, which became a widespread bashing of feminism itself. As a result, feminism in Japan as an academic discipline, which was still in its infancy, got completely shrink. They felt that they had to protect each other so as not to hurt the feelings of their fellow feminist scholars, and a culture of mutual non-criticism was born. In 1999, a Japanese translation of Judith Butler's Gender Trouble was published. Butler's pedantic and abstract queer studies became popular and among the Japanese academics, making her the sole authority in a culture of non-mutual criticism of feminism scholars. The publishing worlds across the academia followed suit. As I have mentioned so far, in a society that has a strong tendency toward male chauvinism and where women are highly objectified, any self-respecting woman will strongly feel that she does not want to be trapped in the gender role of a woman. This feeling is natural as human beings, but in extreme cases, it can lead to misogyny, looking down on and shaming ordinary general women. This misogynistic tendency became intensified among highly educated women who were interested in gender studies. They became more sympathetic toward trans women who they think have bravely stepped out of the male gender role than toward biological women in general. This academic sympathy and misogyny then seeps through to the students who have similar inclination, and young students become more convinced of their ideas by taking in queer favoring popular culture. Another force that plays a certain role, central role in transgenderism in Japan is the liberal male gay activist, as in the case in other countries. This includes gay studies and gender studies scholars in academia. The rising of transgenderism has led those gay activists to take a position on the cause of for the sake of vulnerable trans women who were unfairly excluded from the category of women. As a result, it has been the leftist gay activists who have been the most aggressive toward women who oppose transgenderism on the internet. Even outside of academia, women lawyers, women human rights activists, and most of the opposition women politicians who have made reasonable contribution to the defense of women's rights are now either supporting transgenderism in the name of defending LGBT rights or remain silent for fear of being denounced. Rather, researchers who have nothing to do with gender studies, such as researchers in other humanities and natural sciences, have questioned transgenderism based on a certain amount of social common sense and natural science knowledge.
You gave us a sense of what the laws are like, but what is the one thing that you are worried about with regards to transgenderism impacting women's rights?
Many women fear that spaces that were supposed to be separated by biological sex might no longer be so and will induce crime. Well, what will happen to bathhouses and hot springs in Japan? What happened in the We Spa in Los Angeles, where a person with a male body, including male genitalia, could not be refused to enter a women's bathhouse if he was legally considered a woman. It's something that could happen in Japan if the laws stipulate that there should be no discrimination based on gender identity. It is part of Japanese culture to enjoy hot springs or bath without any clothes, so it is essential to have separate areas, basically according to biological sex. What happened in We Spa may be repeated in hot springs and public baths all over Japan. What will happen to toilet? In Japan, until 20 or 30 years ago, there was no separation between men and women in many toilets. There was no end to the peeping and molesting behavior of men. It was difficult for women to feel safe and relaxed when going out. What is likely to happen in the future is that, step one, men-only, women-only toilet will be gradually decreased, and toilet for both men and women use will increase. Step 2. New law will be stipulated that there should be no discrimination based on gender identity. Step 3. Then women-only toilet will become accessible for men that self-identifying as women. Gender identity cannot be seen from the outside. As I mentioned, women and children are not protected in Japanese culture, where there are many men who try to molest women whenever they get a chance, and men who selfishly consume women as sexual objects. There are already cases that women-only spaces is no longer allowed. In one case, a lesbian bar was accused of discrimination against transgender women for holding a cis-only event. In the field of sports, transgenderism is less pronounced, but a booklet published by prestigious Japan Sports Association recommends giving preference to gender identity over sex. Also, many mainstream prominent newspapers wrote positively about Laurel Hubbard, that transgender women weightlifter at Tokyo Olympics. A recent surprising news was that there is a move by railroad companies to eliminate women-only carriages and make them carriage for everyone, as a way to accommodate those who are concerned about their gender identity. In a society where perverts are rampant and women cannot use public transportation with peace of mind, women-only carriages are essential. Women-only carriages are what we finally acquire after a long period of women's activism. However, it is about to be taken away. Although this news is still just an online news story and not an official announcement by a railroad company, women are speaking out to prevent this from happening in real life. However, many well-known feminists in the gender studies have remained silent so far. They are not trying to protect women at all.
It's really funny, isn't it, how the first thing that gets snatched away is what is exclusively made for women. Nothing that the men exclusively possess has ever been taken away by a female identifying as male. And yet, when it comes to inclusion, what they're doing is excluding female, including men into the category of women. And that's just so heartbreaking. I just, in summary, I was just wondering if you can, when we think about a country, there is very little that we know about what's going on in that country, because our access to information is limited to international news source. International news source often are very pro-liberal, very pro-LGBT. Therefore, the information that we get are not exactly the real picture that is going on in the country. So what would you like to tell the viewers of this channel as to what exactly is going on, and what are your plans? What do you intend to do with all that is going on in the country? How do you plan to mobilize?
I'm just ordinary citizen working at NGO, which is not related to gender issues. If we get together, we can make some change in Japanese society. Women in Japan are suffering from discrimination against women. In contrast to superficial equality, the dignity of Japanese women is undermined. Now, on top of that, transgenderism has taken away women's safety and human rights under the banner of sexual minority rights, and it is difficult to oppose it. The flag wavers are feminist scholars who are respected by the public. However, we Japanese women are not going to be defeated. And in May of this year, I issued a joint statement with like-minded people to oppose the enactment of dangerous law that will pave the way for Japan to become a country of self-ID. Other women are doing what it can do to resist the transgenderism that is actually happening in Japan. We Japanese women ask for your support. We are encouraged and empowered by gender critical feminists around the world. We hope that the struggle of Japanese women to protect women's sex-based rights will become part of the international sisterhood and provide emotional support to women in other countries too.
It feels rather maddening to oppose something like this. That's how they make us feel. They make us feel like we are the ones that are in the wrong, while we are the only ones that are advocating for women's sex-based rights. So I hope that, we can all collectively, through means like this even, to have discussions and have other people watch it, we find a way to form international solidarity and take down this new form of misogyny that is harming us women across the board. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.